Let me show you something.
Right, listen up. This is what you got to do. You got to have Blender, EBSynth, and Stable Diffusion installed. With A111, you got to have EBSynth utility installed. Next, we need to set up a projects folder, and wherever you set it up, it needs to use underscores and not spaces. If you use a space, it will wig out EBSynth utility. So let's create a new folder and call it whatever you want. And within this folder, we need to create some more. So we need to create video, frame, video underscore key, video underscore mask, image to image underscore key, and we're going to create one more which EBSynth won't use, called image to image underscore normal. Okay, next we're going to go over to Blender and start rendering out the image sequences that we need. I'm rendering at 4K, but you could do this at 1080p. You want to make sure that on your output properties you have RGBA selected. The output needs to be in your projects folder, and you need to select video frame. So this is your output for your image sequence. I'm going to be rendering in EV, and you want to make sure that in your properties, your render properties, you have transparent selected. Render a frame out. There you go. Add a 0. EBSynth utility for some reason wants 5 digits rather than 4, so just add a 0 into your output at the end. And we're going to hit Control F12 and render out the frames. And if we go and check, they're being rendered into the video frame folder. Right, now all the video frames have been rendered, we're going to move on to the video masks. We go over to the render properties and we change from render engine EV to workbench. In the lighting we select flat, single, and we set this to white. Very important, we come down to color management, and where it says view transform, filmic, we need to change that to standard. If you don't, this white won't be pure white, it will be slightly off grey. We also want to go to our world properties, viewport display, color. We want to take this all the way down to black. We now also want to change back from transparent, so we want to turn that off. There you go, that's our mask. Now obviously we want to change our output folder, because if we render it now, we're just going to render over the top of our video frames. So we come back to our projects folder and we select video masks. Accept, and again make sure there's a 0, an extra 0 in there for the file name, and render those out. Okay, next is the normal maps. We're going to change from flat to matcap, and then within the matcap you need to select the normal map version. We also want to turn on transparency again and change our output. Obviously this time we're going to do image to image normal. You don't need to render all the frames out, you could just render the frames that you're going to use for EBSynth keyframes, but in this case I'm just going to render everything. And again, leave a 0 in there. Okay, now that we have all the frames that we need to create a video for EBSynth utility. So start another Blender file, video editing, Shift A, image sequence, and then go to your projects folder, select your video frame, and you need to make sure it's in order. So it needs to be organized by name. Click A for all, and you add the image strip. Now this is set for 1080p, so we right click on this and we click set render size. Now I'm just going to delete this again, and I'm going to add it a second time just to be sure. Right, and we want to take this to the end. In my case it's 233. We change it to 30 frames per second. And now we just want to find the output. Right. Encoding. I don't think this really matters. High quality. MPEG. We're going to output this to our projects folder and just put it in the root of that folder. And then control F12 and render it. Okay, once you've got your video rendered out, it's time to move over to a quadruple one. Now over here under your EBSynth utility, you want to add your project directory. So we'll go back here, we'll select that, copy, paste, and you also want your original movie path. Now you can go this way and you can select it like this, but what happens is you get the wrong path name. So what you actually want to do is, we know it's in the root of this, so we're just going to switch that, and that is actually the path. Now you can let EBSynth utility choose the keyframes for you, and this is based on these settings here, and this is what you would use if you were doing a video. We've essentially skipped these first two stages. If you gave this the video originally, say it was a video of you, what these first two stages would do was create a mask, generate a mask for the subject, and select the keyframes to be used for EBSynth. But in my case, I already know which keyframes I want to select, because my subject doesn't really change much throughout the animation. You have to have the first and last frames as keyframes. So if we go here, 1 and 233, so let's copy that. Video key, and we'll paste it in there. So you have to have the first and the last. Now in my case, because I'm using a looping animation, the first and the last frames are exactly the same. And this will help a little with consistency. But I also want to have my mid frame. So we go to here, if we go down, scroll down to 115, and I'll just copy that. So I set my animation to keep it simple and to use as little keyframes as possible. So mine just goes side view, front view, and then back again. Next we want to go over to stable diffusion in a quadruple one and start rendering out our frames for image to image key. So we go to our projects folder, select our first video key, and we also want to add our normal map to controlNet. So we select normal map, turn off the preprocessor because we're already giving it a normal map, upload, go to your projects and select the corresponding normal. Now if you're doing a lot of EBSynth keyframes, you can batch process this and it will use the correct corresponding normal map based on the file name. So you would put your input, your output, and then you would add your normal map into this part, and then so it will use image frame 1 with normal map frame 1 and so on. So your preprocessor is off. You can change how heavy it sticks to the normal. We're just going to do that. The resolution I've set is 1080p. I'm working with 4K, so I'm going to upscale this. We'll get to that. And then so you just need to work out what style you want to go with. Once you've got your stable diffusion renders done, next we want to upscale them back up to 4K. So either using batch processing or doing it manually, you want to set your resize to 2, select your upscaler and then upscale those keyframes. Next you want to open those upscale keyframes in Photoshop because we're going to mask out the background. So open them up, go to your projects folder, select video mask and choose the mask that you want. So we want 1. Select all, copy, unlock the layer, put a mask on it, mask layer, hold down Alt and click on the mask, paste in your mask, and there you go. We're going to save that in our projects folder under image to image key, and we're going to give it 5 digits, so 1 2 3 4 1. The next one is, for me, is frame 115. Select all, copy, unlock the layer, put a layer mask, alt click. Right now, because the first and last is the same, I'm just going to copy that in. And it's 233. So I have the first, middle, and last. Now we want to go back over to EBSynth utility and set up our EBS file for EBSynth. What we want to do is select stage 5, rename keyframes and generate .ebs file. So once you've got that selected, you should just be able to hit generate and we can see it's done it. It's completed. When we go over to our projects folder, we've now got our EBS file. From here, we open up EBSynth, open, go to your projects folder, select that file we just created, and here you can see it's now set up to do its EBSynth rendering. And all we need to do now is click Run All. And what this is going to do is create folders in your projects folder for rendering out these frames. I'm going to leave that to run and come back in a bit. Once all your EBSynth frames have been rendered, we want to click on Export to AE. It'll ask you what frame rate you want set. We are working in 30 frames per second. Now that we have the frames in After Effects, we want to add the background layer. So go back to your animation and you want to get rid of your subject, render out an EV path, save it in our projects folder, and we want to do the same for a matte cap. We want to now render out a still frame for the background. Once you've got your background rendered, you want to add that to your After Effects file. Something else you can add is a shadow pass. In my instance, I want to add my subject and my chair to its own collection. Under your filter properties, you want to make sure you have holdout selected. So that here, holding down Shift, selecting holdout, if we render this out, we essentially have the background acting as a shadow catcher, and you want to render these out to their own folder. And so that when we add them to our After Effects file, we can change the blending mode to something like hard light or multiply. The EBSynth sequence has been pre-composed, and I've added a brightness and contrast and a refined soft matte and a matte choker. And that gets rid of the leftover black from the clip. Probably do with a bit of shadow behind